We turn now to New Jersey Governor Christie, who joins us from outside an ethanol plant in Jewell, Iowa. Governor, everyone is looking for a way to stop these kinds of attacks again. But in this case, you had a woman who dropped off her 6-month-old child before going on this rampage. How would you ever create a system that could catch that kind of dedicated killer?
Well, John, it's very hard. And listen, what I said in the aftermath of this, and by the way, on the first night of the coverage, I watched it for about an hour and a half, and I turned to my wife and said, this is a terrorist attack. I knew that because of the experience I've had as a U.S. attorney for 7 years investigating terrorists and bringing those cases. I don't know why the president hesitates for so long to call it exactly what it is. But what it'll tell you is if a developmentally disabled center in San Bernardino, California is a target, then every place in America is a target. And that's why it was so wrong for Congress and the president to pull back on our surveillance capability with the NSA. So wrong to demoralize our intelligence community through the report they issued at the end of this last year. The fact is that we need to strengthen our intelligence, strengthen our law enforcement community, and just work as hard as we can to try to intercept this, knowing that in a free and open society, we're not going to be able to stop every attack.
Those surveillance capabilities that you talked about, though, were grandfathered in until the end of November, so they were in place here. There's not any evidence that that they missed something through that.
Well, listen, I don't know as to San Bernardino, but I think certainly vis-a-vis Paris, our pulling back and our lessening our resources on intelligence, which the president has done also, has created a big problem. And I think we're going to see that Paris was an intelligence failure. And you're asking, what's the best way to do it? I've been doing this for 7 years before I was governor. The only way to truly protect the homeland, John, is increased intelligence and increased law enforcement activity. That doesn't mean there are guarantees, but if you give these people the tools, they'll act constitutionally and they'll prevent many, many more attacks than we'll get through.
Donald Trump suggests people should stop worrying about profiling Muslims in investigations, and that they should stop being so politically correct. Your reaction?
Well, listen, all I'd say is that this is the difference between having experience and understanding how you do this and not having any experience. The fact is we don't need to be profiling in order to be able to get the job done here. Increased surveillance, creating relationships with mosques in the Muslim American community across the country. We did that after 9/11 and prevented attacks in New Jersey and all across the country. What you need is a president who's had the experience and the know-how to do this and not someone who's just going to talk off the top of their head.
After the attacks on 9/11, George W. Bush and other Republicans were quick to draw a real distinction between the attackers and the Muslim community and the Islamic faith. That doesn't happen so much anymore on the campaign trail. Why is that?
Well, I don't know, but I certainly have said it, John, over and over again. I said, this is the problem with the president and with Secretary Clinton, who provide leadership by euphemism. They won't say radical Islamic jihadists. Now, when you say radical Islamic jihadists, they understand, the rest of the Muslim community understands, the folks who are peaceful and who attend mosques in a peaceful way, work in our country, raise their families, pay their taxes. They know they're not radical Islamic jihadists. That's why we need to use the words, because it differentiates them from the peaceful, law-abiding American Muslims who play by the rules and raise their families and don't want to see this kind of conduct going on.
In Saturday's New York Times, on the front page, they have an editorial in which the editorial writers say it is a moral outrage that people can legally purchase weapons, quote, that kill with brutal speed and efficiency. What's your reaction to that?
It's typical liberal claptrap from the New York Times. And the fact is that what we need to be focused on here are two issues. Taking criminals who commit crimes with handguns and putting them in jail. And we have to work on our mental health system in this country to give doctors and caregivers greater latitude to involuntarily commit folks who have mental health issues and who don't want to take their medication and help themselves. This kind of sensationalism. Remember, the president and the secretary, before they even knew what was going on here, ran out on the first moments after this attack and said this was a gun control issue. I don't know what gun control laws, John, are going to stop terrorists from attacking us. But this is the typical liberal approach to things. The president has said it. No crisis is worth wasting. And they wanted to try to turn this awful tragedy into an excuse to have greater gun control, when what we really need is greater intelligence, which the president has taken away from this country with the complicity of Senators Cruz and Senator Paul. And we need to make sure that we back our law enforcement so that they can take these criminals off the streets.
On the question of the speed and efficiency of certain guns, you were once an opponent of what opponents to these kinds of weapons call assault rifles. You've changed your view on that. Why?
Well, first of all, that was 22 years ago, John. And yeah, I've grown up a bit and changed my view and been educated on it. And really, my views changed once I became a prosecutor. When I became a prosecutor and saw that what the real problem here is that we need to give the tools to law enforcement to go on the streets and take criminals off the streets. That's the real important thing that we need to do. We need to empower our law enforcement to do that. This administration hasn't done it. In fact, the FBI director has said that there's a chill wind blowing through law enforcement, and a great deal of that is because they don't have the political support of this administration. When I'm president, they'll have that support.
All right, Governor Chris Christie, thanks so much for being with us.
John, thanks for having me today. Have a great weekend.